Really, most people have fallen to what we call the exhausted majority. And that's over 75% of us who feel that whatever divisions we even perceive of each other, they're not so great that we still can't get along with one another. And so I share that message for people who are feeling like, I can't even open my mouth about politics or things will go sideways fast. Say, hey, folks, you're probably right about that. And the best thing you can do is just connect with other people.
Hello. I'm here with Kamy Akhavan, and he is the managing director of the USC Center for the Political Future. And we are going to be talking about all kinds of great things today, especially about how politics are influencing fundraising, grants, all of the things. Even we can talk a little bit about higher ed because that's where you're at. So welcome back on the podcast. We had you on a couple of years ago. It's been, I think, about a year and a half. So welcome back, Kamy. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, Holly. I'm such a fan of yours, and I'm happy to be back with you today to talk about some pretty bummer topics. Politics today, social division. But the good news is that the way that it impacts our fundraising efforts in the nonprofit world, we can put a positive twist on it. And there's some opportunity that we see in the chaos.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I like the positive twist. I like the opportunities and chaos that we can talk about. So, yeah. So, and where you working before? We had you on the show before. So you all will definitely want to hear that podcast episode because we were talking about, and I love, what you said, and I bring it to topics and conversations a lot, Kamy. Actually, I'm like, but there was this podcast.
Well, thank you.
Because I like what you said about the loss of the central court or the central place, like, the central square. And that's been maybe what's impacted part of this, like, really high division within our communities now or within the broader nation, right? And that really resonated with me, to talk about that, like, oh, if we did have a central square in my area, and we do in Guam, we have the mayor's offices, right? There's still some of that where there's not as much division locally here. And I'm like, what makes Guam different than maybe, a place in the United States? And I'm like, maybe that's a part of it. So yeah, do you want to talk about that a little bit more? Because that really resonated with me.
Thanks for the opportunity to do it. I mean, I think about the public square broadly. That is opportunities for us to see one another physically, to be in the presence of our neighbors, our coworkers, just physically. So those opportunities have shrunk over the last several decades. And I'm talking about something as basic as going to the grocery store. Fewer people are doing it. They're spending less time there because they're purchasing more of their goods, either from delivery services or from Amazon, the internet. So there's no reason for them to go out the house for shopping. The same for movies. Movie ticket sales have declined across the cinematic universe for decades now. And it's because, there's streaming services, Hulu and Netflix and Prime and HBO Max and all of those things. So why go out for the movies? Same with sporting events with 3,000 plus channels on our cable services and streaming services. You don't need to go to a sporting event. You don't need to go to concerts. So people are spending more time isolated indoors and they're making connections digitally. But the problem is that digitally, the way that our technologies work is that they're also isolating. So yes, it's true. We can connect with anybody pretty much on the planet and have instant access to the kind of information that would have just blown people's minds away even 100 years ago. So we have speed to information and complete and unfettered access to so much knowledge. However, we are also increasingly lonely and feeling isolated from one another as human beings. The number of friends that the average person has today is far smaller than it was even 20 or 30 years ago. That's for both men and women. We're seeing rates of anxiety and depression among teenagers, especially teenage girls, going hockey stick levels high, right? It's just shooting up. And that kind of anxiety is coming from their use of social media. There's a direct causal relationship between hours spent on social media and feelings of negative self-worth and inclinations towards self-harm. So we wonder, like, how is it that we're living at a time when we have such tremendous, incredible capacity for digital connection, and yet we're feeling so disconnected from one another as human beings, to the degree that this disconnection is causing fear, it's causing anxiety, it's causing depression, and it's causing us to perceive people who are not like us, not just as maybe political opponents or or someone that we could get to know, we're treating them increasingly as enemies. And it's creating this kind of animosity towards our neighbors and our colleagues and our coworkers that is really unprecedented in American history. It's a form of division called affective polarization. And that's where it's not I'm right, you're wrong, which is fine. It's I'm right, you're evil. And when someone is evil, anything we do to stop that evil is completely justified. And so people are doing increasingly outrageous things, having greater propensities to violence in order to stop the other, to stop the evil. And all of it comes back down to we're just not connecting with each other as human beings. That public square is really shrinking at the time when all of these forces of division are accelerating. So to take a step back and just say, hey, I didn't cause that problem. I'm just trying to live my best life, and being aware of all these forces that are kind of guiding and shaping our thoughts that we're cognizant of, but maybe not enough so to where we can feel like, hey, you know how I can feel good? I'm going to turn my phone off. I'm only going to listen to Holly Rustick podcasts from now on so I can feel good about the future and not be so worried that my neighbor is a Trump or Biden supporter or is a secret socialist or, whatever. Those things they're just caricatures. Really, most people have fallen to what we call the exhausted majority. And that's over 75% of us who feel that whatever divisions we even perceive of each other, they're not so great that we still can't get along with one another. And so I share that message for people who are feeling like, I can't even open my mouth about politics or things will go sideways fast. Say, hey, folks, you're probably right about that. And the best thing you can do is just connect with other people. It's the number one thing to do is just have conversations. That's the currency of change. Have conversations with people. Be curious about them. If they say things that are triggering, then just ask, oh, why do you think that? How long have you had that point of view? Where did you get that from? What can you tell me more about your upbringing? And we can, respectfully try to get to the root of where they're coming from and maybe still not like it or agree with it at all, but have a better chance of developing a relationship, earning some trust. And once you have a little trust, then you can leverage that trust to maybe get them to see differently on issues. But without the trust, without the listening, forget about changing anybody's mind, much less getting along.
Right. That's so good. And it just brings back the point of like, sure, there's so much that happens digitally that does connect us. Like we're talking today, you and I, in two different places completely. And there's so much, so much good from that. But then there's so much disconnect that you're pointing out as well that I think is important just to know. Like, yes, those things can create conveniences of shopping online or whatnot. And yes, that might be like what you need at the time as a busy mom and all of that. But at the same time, like have your like a hobby or areas where you can connect still in person. And that's so good, right? For all of us. Like you always leave an event usually going, that was good. Like, I'm glad I connected. I'm glad I got to see so-and-so. There is something that's so fulfilling on that as well. Like it really feeds our souls, right?
I think you're totally right about that. And the way I see it as influencing the way we think about our work in the nonprofit sphere is that starvation. And it's really a basic human need for connection. We are a social species. It's something I don't want to say unique to human beings, but it's certainly part of being a human. And it's not true of all other animal species, but it is true of human beings that we need connection. So if people need connection and we need to connect heart to heart and feel like people understand us and we feel safe, then the way that we communicate what our nonprofits do, if we can make those heart-to-heart connections with other people and not get bogged down in jargon and statistics and logos and credibility issues and try to prove ourselves, if we can just connect, like, for instance, if somebody wants to build water wells in Bolivia, this is a nonprofit I'm working with, and it's a wonderful thing they're doing, water wells in Bolivia. And if I talk to people here in Los Angeles about water wells in Bolivia, a question I'll often get is, where's Bolivia? Why can't they make their own water wells, right? And so there's a big curve that we have to account for. Like, how do we explain to educate them as well as connect their hearts? So rather than go that approach of saying, well, Bolivia is here on the map and they have, the X amount of water per square miles, we can say, did you know someone that I have worked with who lives in Bolivia, They live in so remote of a town that they cannot get fresh water. And when they do want water, they have to send their kids to walk for 6 hours to carry 2 buckets of water all the way back just so that they can have basic sanitation, wash their hands, brush their teeth, bathe, and then drink water. That's what they have to go through. And it's nuts. And these are little kids doing the work. And wouldn't it be amazing if they didn't have to do all that work and instead could just have open up the faucet, have instant access to water, and then they could spend that much more of their time on their education and doing other things that are vitally important to get them into a better economic place. When I can explain it that way and get someone to really visualize the act of retrieving water, Bolivia's location is irrelevant. The number of freshwater outlets per square mile is irrelevant. It's really just connecting hearts to hearts. And I think the capacity for that is so great in today's age because it's so absent in our digital lives. And when we communicate in the nonprofit space about those opportunities that we can provide for people to feel like they're doing social good and they're learning about issues and they're curious about people and they're being problem solvers and addressing some really emotionally challenging topics and problems, people are grateful for that. They need that. We need that as human beings. So I'd say don't shy away from certain problems or issues because you're like, oh, it's too hard to articulate. If you can find an emotional way to connect what's in your heart to what's in that person's heart, then the opportunity for fundraising right now is really, really high because of that tremendous craving for emotional connection.
Right. And I love that. And also, like, let's talk about like things going on. We're recording this in May 2025. So also, like, we've been seeing a lot of different things happen, right, in the fundraising, in the grant writing world. So, like, what are some of your thoughts too? And you talked about there's some opportunities here, there's some silver lines. Like, let's talk about those.
Yeah. Well, as we both know, in the nonprofit fundraising world, who matters a lot more than what. And so what we write in our grant proposals is, of course, important, but who we're submitting it to matters a lot. And so when the opportunity in chaos, I'd say, comes from our capacity to do some research and figure out who's going to be receiving the document that I'm about to send over. How well do they know us? How well do they know people who are serving on my board? How well do they know members of my staff? Is this my first time or fifth time requesting the dollars? Have I already received money? I'm asking for more. How can I tell stories that will really resonate with the recipient? So that's the opportunity. So imagine that the receiver of the grant proposal is someone like us. There's someone who watches the news and thinks, oh my gosh, what's going on in our country? They may have a lot of anxiety. They might stay home instead of going to the movies. They might not have sent their kids to do all the little league sports and all the soccer team and do all that stuff because they didn't have time in their busy lives. Maybe there's 2 income earners. This is a typical American existence now. It's a lot of hustling and it's a lot of, I wish I had more time to spend with my family. So imagine that the person receiving the grant proposal is just like us. They're going to want to connect with and identify with what they're seeing. They're not going to have time to really think, well, I'm going to excuse all these little errors that I came across in the letter of inquiry or in the grant proposal itself. So make it easy for them to connect with us and then tell stories in compelling ways and to do it in a personal way where that person feels seen and heard. A little bit of research and some side connection really goes a tremendously long way because at the end of the day, it's the person who's going to greenlight the project and it's not AI. It's not going to be some bot that has analyzed your proposal for its merit. It's going to be someone's subjective feeling about it. Going, should I, shouldn't I? And in order for them to have their feelings tilt your way, you got to strengthen that heart-to-heart connection. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to telling stories using the narrative pathways of our brain, which are very different than the pathways, the chemically and neurologically different pathways that are used for communicating statistics and logos and logic and explaining a problem in a very dispassionate way. We have to connect hearts. And that's our real superpower right now. And I'd say anyone in fundraising now, lean into that. Lean into that first. articulate the problem in a way that is relatable. And then after you connect with someone, then you can back it up with, oh, look at all these major entities that are connected with our institution, and you build up your credibility, and look at our impact, and look at our other metrics, and sort of prove your worth. But initially it has to start with pathos. It's by far the biggest mode of persuasion in the nonprofit world. It has been for decades, and it's increasingly relevant in today's world.
Yeah, I love that so much. And then we often say, like, when you use statistics and you use testimonials and you use these surveys and all the things that you need for like sources and citations, when you do it correctly, you can also invoke emotion, right? Like that's where you can also get that kind of storytelling too, is to be like, yes, let's paint the picture. And then, like you said, lean in with some of these statistics or some of these testimonials or whatever, right? To like really support it. And I think that's so, so powerful of what you're saying, like lean into the storytelling part. And even looking at another thing that I just wanted to note that you said is really interesting, because I've been saying this too, right? Especially the last month, I'm like, people are peopling. And it's like, what you're saying is the person who's reviewing the grant right now is also in the same moment of time as you are, and they're a person, right? So they're also like, we've seen Meet the Moment. I don't know if you've been hearing about that, but foundations are coming together to say, hey, we're going to meet this moment, we're going to double down, we're going to give more funding right now to different nonprofits. Like we are seeing foundations step into this place to say we're going to still give to nonprofits. But to your point, we've seen the most immediate, like even on the back end in our programs, people have been like, hey, one of my nonprofit clients, like they just had one of their foundations reach out to them and say, hey, we're going to give you some more money without even asking for it. So they are, because of the relationship, right? Exactly. Because of the relationship. So how can people, do you think, if they don't have those relationships yet, because submitting grants can feel very cold and very distant, like don't talk to us, we just want to see the application, right? Like, is there any way to create that connection?
Yeah, it's one of those fundamental challenges in the nonprofit space, where you might come to a foundation and says, we do not accept unsolicited inquiries. And you're like, well, there's no phone number, there's no email. How do I even explain to them who I am for them to even solicit me? How do I even get in? I think research is the answer. Research is another word for stalking, but basically you go to LinkedIn and figure out who do I know that knows some of their staff? Who do I know that knows some of their board? And work those side angles into the organization. Be where they are. If they are funding an organization that has a major gala every year, go to the gala and then meet the funders and the donors there. That's an opportunity to be in front of their face. And then it shows that you care about what they care about. And that goes a long way. Being curious about other people genuinely is really what networking is. And some people who are afraid of networking and consider it sort of a dirty word, and I don't like it and I feel phony. No, networking is really just talking to people like you are interested in what they have to say. And that can be true for anyone. We're just curious, where'd you grow up? Where are you from? Oh, I didn't know. How long have you been working there? Why did you pick this foundation over that foundation? What goes into your mind when you're trying to decide between 100 good causes and you can only pick one? These kinds of things I think are really ways to connect with people, and then they'll feel like you have a genuine relationship. And again, it all comes down to that fact that we're building trust with these conversations, and we can't build trust any other way than human to human. It's hard to do it through papers. You can do it, obviously. Good grant writers are great at doing that. But it ultimately comes down to, does that person feel like you care about what they care about? Do you have some kind of heart-to-heart connection? So just research, be where they are, and then you can find those opportunities to develop trust, and don't be shy about it.
Yeah, silver lining. And I like that. There's just different ways to like understand where we are with connection and why connection is so important. So thank you so much, Kamy, for coming back on the podcast, talking about this. I think I think this is like such a vital message. So I really think it's important to be like, We just need a level set right now, and creating those relationships is key, especially for nonprofits looking for funding right now. It's okay if you don't have them yet. You can create them. Does it take time? Yeah. But are there payoffs? Absolutely. Absolutely. You still have a cause for your nonprofit that still needs to be they're taken care of, right? And that's not going to go over way overnight. So developing those relationships is key. Any last words before we close out today?
Nonprofit work allows you to bring your whole self into the work, and what's in your heart can be communicated to other people in a way that is genuine and authentic. And that's really one of the great experiences of being in this space. Hats off to you, Holly, because you've empowered so many people to open up, to be vulnerable, to share what's in their hearts, to bring money into these nonprofit organizations so that they continue to do good in the world. Again, I'm a real fan, and I admire what you do so much. And so for me, it's just a great privilege. So keep asking me and I'll keep coming back. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, you can find me at the USC Center for the Political Future. And I'm happy to keep conversations going.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for coming on. We'll have all of your links in the show notes as well. Yeah, and we'll definitely have you back on because we need to talk about other things going on too, in education and so much more. But yeah, I love what we talked about today. I think it's so great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
You're super welcome. I'll see you later.